Spring is the time of the year that we prune our roses. There are a lot of gardeners I know that prune their roses when the forsythia is in flower. I like to wait until at least the buds have broken out, those leaves have started to grow. That way I can tell the live wood from the dead wood easier and make better decisions when I'm pruning on this rose bush. But no matter when we prune our roses, it's important that we get it done at least a couple of weeks before the average last frost date. And in most of Oklahoma, that's mid to late April. So right now we're kind of toward the end of that window. So if you haven't got your roses pruned, we need to do it pretty quick. Unless, of course, you have the type of roses that only bloom once during the year. If you have a rose that only puts on a flush of flowers in the springtime and then doesn't bloom for the rest of the year, don't prune those right now. Wait until after they've flowered and then prune those immediately after those flowers have faded. If we prune those now, we'd be cutting off all of the flower buds. Well, one type of pruning that we can do any time of the year on roses or pretty much any other woody shrub is the type of wood that falls into the category of the 3 Ds. That is, any wood that is dead, diseased, or damaged. And on this rose bush, we've got a little bit of dead wood right down here. We're lucky we didn't have a lot of dieback this winter, but you can see down here we definitely have some dead shoots, and we're just going to come in and cut away that dead wood. If you cut away any wood that you suspect has a diseased problem, it's a good idea to disinfect your cutting tools before you move on. Just take a solution that is 10% bleach, 90% water, just dip the cutting portion of your tools, dry them off before you go on to any other roses. Now, when it comes to tools to prune roses, we of course like our hand pruners for those smaller stems. A little bit larger stems are going to require the use of some loppers. And then for those larger canes, maybe those lower thick canes, we can take our folding pruning saw. And these work really well to get in between those different canes and cut away the canes that you want to take out. It's important that your cutting tools be sharp so we can make good clean cuts on our plant. We don't want large jagged wounds. They're going to take a little bit longer to heal and leave an open door for any disease organisms to come in. Of course, another tool would be some nice leather gloves. We don't want those rose thorns getting into our hands, and also long sleeves are important. We don't want our forearms to be all scratched up. Well, before we start pruning our rose, we need to ask ourselves why we're pruning it in the first place. And there are a number of reasons why we prune our rose bushes. We prune them to control their size, maybe to create a different shape, but the most important reason we prune our roses is to stimulate flowering. Our rose bushes will flower more if we give them a light pruning each year. And this rose that we're getting ready to prune here is a shrub rose. It's known as Carefree Beauty. It also goes by the name of Katy Road Pink. This is the rose that the Antique Rose Emporium in Texas grew and marketed as a found rose, the name they call them. It was a rose, they didn't know the name of it, they gave it the name Katy Road Pink, and then years later they determined that it was the same as Carefree Beauty. But it is a great rose for Oklahoma, large pink flowers almost continually throughout the growing season. But it's gotten a little bit taller than what we wanted, so we want to lower the height of this plant and we want to maintain that natural form. Well, after we've taken out those 3 Ds, the dead, the diseased, the damaged wood, if you have an older shrub rose, we can come in and cut out some of those larger canes. If you look down here at the base of this plant, you can see that some of these canes are still green, whereas some of these older ones are a lot bigger in circumference and they've started to turn sort of brown or gray. If we wanted to thin out this plant, we could come in and cut these back to the ground with our folding saw. This plant has only been here about 4 years, so we're not going to cut away on any of those older canes. We still have lots of vigor in this plant. The rose bushes that we cut back are the shrub roses, and some other roses that fit into this category are the polyanthus, the English roses, the miniatures, rugosa roses, and the floribundas, those shrub roses that we want to prune in a way that they still look like a landscape flowering shrub. If this were a hybrid tea rose, we would cut it back drastically. We would only leave about 3 to 5 canes, but we're not going to do that to our shrub roses. We're going to leave several canes, and it's going to maintain that naturalistic form. Well, when we prune this plant, we're going to take off no more than 1/3 of the growth. So when we're finished pruning it, we're going to have the height about this level right here. So to get started, I'm just going to sort of cut blindly away to take off some of this top growth and then come back later and make some selective cuts. Well, now that we've taken off a lot of that top growth, we just wanted to kind of get a lot of that out of the way so we could see the shrub a little better here. And now we're going to come back and do some more selective pruning. We're going to clean up some of these nubs that we've left in place here. We don't want to leave a lot of just a leafless part of the stem there, so I'm going to cut that all the way back. We've got another one right down here. I'm going to come down here to the branch and cut that, get rid of that piece. We've got another one here we're going to take off. And if you look at this branch right here, you can see that it's really growing back toward the center part of the shrub. It's really going to kind of make a tangled mess, and I'm going to cut it off back here and get rid of that. Now, one way we can keep those branches from being directed toward the inner part of the plant is that while we're pruning, we want to cut back to an outward facing bud, or this late in the game, an outward facing branchlet. Right down here we've got a good example. If I were to come in and cut right here, this branch would continue on. The growth would be directed more toward the inner part of the plant. But right here we've got a better example. The branchlet is facing outwards, so we can come in, make a cut about 1/4 of an inch above that branchlet. We don't want to cut too much closer, otherwise we could kill that little branchlet, but that will direct the growth outwards. We also want to do sort of a slanting cut. We don't want any water to set on the cut surface very long. We want it to drain off, dry off quick. That way those disease pathogens will less likely take up residence in that place. So we'll keep cutting back. We'll get rid of these little nubs. We'll cut back to those outward facing buds or branchlets, and we'll just keep working on this plant and try to maintain that naturalistic form. So I'm just going to keep cutting and keep working on this plant. Well, we finished making our cuts to our rose bush here. We've cleaned up all of those nubs that we left when we initially took off the top growth of the plant. We've made our cuts all back to outward facing buds instead of those going towards the inner part of the plant. And we've tried to maintain the natural shape of the plant. We didn't try to flatten it off or make it rounded or box it into a square or anything like that. We tried to keep that natural form of the plant. We took off about 1/3 of the growth. Now, if you have a younger plant that's been in the ground maybe 1 or 2 years, you might want to leave more than 2/3 of the plant. Let it get a little bit more established. Also, if you have grafted roses, make sure that there aren't suckers growing up from the understock or the rootstock of the grafted plant. Those suckers usually look a lot different than the rest of the rose. They tend to just shoot up really fast, and if they bloom, a lot of the times they'll have different colored flowers, so they're easy to tell. Make sure you keep all of those cut away. Another thing to remember on our roses, a lot of the times we'll get roses and they'll have a metal tag attached with a wire, and a lot of the times if that wire is left on, it can strangle a branch and eventually kill it. I've seen lots of rose bushes with dead branches, and the problem can be traced to the little wire with a tag still tied around the branch, and eventually kills it out. So make another label or make a map and write down the name of the plant. You could also get some of these little stretchy cords to tie the label onto the plant. As the branches or the canes get larger, this will grow or stretch with the branch and won't cause any of those strangulation problems. So remove any wires that are on your rose plants. And again, remember, this time of the year, if you haven't got your roses pruned back, it's time to get out into the yard and get those cut back so we can have a new flush of flowers and lots more of them on our shrub roses.